Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. In this episode, we're taking a critical look at the shifting narratives around human progress and legacy, especially as they relate to the choices we make about continuity and meaning in our lives. As conversations about declining fertility rates in developed countries grow louder, it's clear that something deeper is happening. It's an irony of our age. We spent centuries building a world meant to endure forever, only to find ourselves now mesmerized by the fleeting. Legacy, once as solid as the stone walls and ironclad traditions that fortified it, was rooted in the belief that family, growth, and success could be touched, held, and passed down. Legacy was continuity. You worked, you married, you had children, and they carried your name and bloodline into the future. This was the ultimate marker of achievement, a promise of permanence. And yet here we are now, in a world that moves too quickly for roots to take hold, where continuity feels almost quaint. Take the changing landscape of fertility rates. In much of the developed world, fewer people are having children, not simply as a lifestyle choice, but as a sign of something deeper, a revelation that old assumptions no longer hold. Family lineage was once the story we clung to, a way to feel that our lives mattered because they linked us to the past and anchored us to the future. But now, as we drift through crowded cities or sprawling suburbs, many find themselves questioning that story. Why reproduce? Why build for a future that feels uncertain, even unrecognizable? And if we're not building families, what are we building? In the boom years following the Second World War, legacy was a tangible thing. You bought a house, planted a tree, maybe even got a promotion. These things we were assured would endure. There was comfort in the simplicity of it all. Houses, families, careers, they were bricks in the walls of permanence we constructed around ourselves. But today, as the climate warms and societies fray, we can no longer ignore the paradox embedded within these constructs. Growth, which once seemed synonymous with progress, is now tied to environmental degradation. The pursuit of ever larger homes, families, and fortunes has taken on a grotesque quality in the face of resource depletion and mass displacement. So we hover in this peculiar space, torn between nostalgia for a world where things were built to last and a creeping suspicion that all of it, houses, fortunes, institutions, might be artifacts of a different age. What was once celebrated as noble ambition now feels cumbersome, like carrying an old relic into a future that no longer wants it. We wonder if we have mistaken growth for progress, permanence for success. And in this shifting landscape, even family trees, once mapped with pride, now seem like relics. Where they once traced our existence backward and forward, today they feel more like webs, expanding and contracting with each choice, reforming with shifting loyalties and modern imperatives. It's a strange contradiction. We've never been so connected, yet so untethered from the traditional bonds that once defined us. This isn't merely a story of loss. In a world that demands transience, we're finding new ways to leave our mark. Legacy, no longer anchored in physical endurance, is shifting toward emotional resonance. It's not about building something that lasts, but about creating something that feels. This shift is visible in the rise of digital legacies, blogs, social media profiles, podcasts, all like footprints left behind in the sand. There's a peculiar kind of freedom in this. As the old definitions of legacy crumble, we find ourselves unbound from the expectations of lineage. Instead, we craft connections that matter in the moment. And paradoxically, these fleeting impacts often feel more significant than the grand permanent structures of the past. Maybe the oak tree was never the right symbol for us. Perhaps we're more like wildflowers, blooming brightly and briefly, spreading seeds carried by the wind. And yet, the meadow comes alive each season, a mosaic of colour and life, as if to say that the fleeting can be just as powerful as the permanent. Our work, too, has evolved into something more fragmented. The stable career is no longer the rule, it's the exception. Where work once provided a lifelong identity, it's now a series of transient roles in an ever-shifting economy. We no longer retire with the gold watch and standing ovation. Instead, we log off Zoom calls where we toast our transitions with digital glasses raised to digital avatars. Even our farewells are ephemeral. We piece together lives from temporary gigs and digital interactions. And while this may seem liberating to some, There's an undeniable cost, a nagging sense of emptiness, a longing for something more grounded, more real. The old rituals, the handshakes, the eye contact have been replaced by email threads and emoji reactions. We curate personas instead of forming relationships, trading intimacy for visibility, depth for reach. It's a paradox. We're present everywhere, yet seem absent everywhere that matters. In this landscape, we wander unmoored from the certainties of the past. Like seeds scattered on the wind, we trust that some will find fertile ground, even if we may never see the bloom. It's tempting to see this as a loss, but perhaps it's just a different kind of legacy. Rather than the towering oak, we have the meadow, a transient burst of beauty that, while fleeting, is no less profound. We're redefining what it means to leave a mark. It's no longer about permanence, it's about presence. Instead of enduring monuments, we find ourselves drawn to ephemeral moments that resonate. Family, work, community, all things we once counted on as pillars of our identity, are shifting in meaning. The family tree, once a symbol of stability, now spans continents, embracing friends and mentors, co-workers and strangers. We're less bound by blood than by shared experiences. Our careers are no longer linear. We don't climb ladders, we traverse networks, creating value in ways that don't fit neatly into the old boxes. In this interconnected world, legacy becomes a mosaic. Each piece, a connection, an idea, a moment of influence reflects who we are and who we are not. Legacy is less about reproduction or expansion, more about connection and influence. As we move through this landscape, we are less focused on creating structures that will last forever and more concerned with crafting connections that resonate in the here and now. And in this way, we find continuity, not in the family trees of old, but in the digital webs that stretch across continents, in the fleeting interactions that leave an impression. Our legacy is no longer something we can touch or pass down. It's something we feel, something that reverberates. We may not be building for eternity, but we're finding meaning in the moment, in the resonance of now. Thank you for joining us on the Deeper Thinking podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Your support and positive feedback help us connect with even more curious minds.